Good morning, everyone. You're listening to Sanctuary's Coffee and Conversation. I'm Myrna Haskell, Executive Editor of Sanctuary Magazine. This is an online publication for women that empowers and inspires with a focus on the arts, humanitarian pursuits, health and wellness, inspirational travel, career, and finance. You can find us at sanctuary-magazine.com. This morning, my guests are Dr. Sherry Kelly and her daughter, Kaitlyn Kelly, co-founders of PositiviTeens, which offers customized workshops for parents, teens, and teachers. Dr. Kelly is also a clinical psychologist, and she is founder of Mind and Heart Coaching. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for joining me today.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, I want to let the audience know, and I want to thank you too. PositiviTeens is one of our sponsors for our current Focus on Youth issue. This is our 6th annual. It's a very popular issue. You know, we feature young artists and we support young women through this issue. So that brings us to today's topic, which is helping your teens bust through burnout, which is perfect for this month, right? Because we know that young people are experiencing a lot of overwhelm, particularly with the pandemic. But anyways, I would like to start by asking each of you, maybe you might want to start, Dr. Sherry, with what you think it is about the environment today that causes teens to experience a lot of overwhelm and then to eventually burn out. And I guess maybe go a little bit into, I mean, the elephant in the room is the pandemic, right? But I think we were seeing this even before the pandemic. So I'm interested to hear what you both have to say about it.
Well, thank you. Kaitlyn and I can both speak to this issue, but even before the pandemic, we've really have a generation of young people who, although more connected than ever before because of technology and social media, they're actually more disconnected from one another and more socially isolated. And, you know, the average teenager spends about 25 to 30 hours per week right now on social media. So that's more than one day a week that they're giving up to social media pursuits. And there's a lot of what Kaitlyn calls FOMO, or fear of missing out.
Yeah, FOMO, yeah.
You know, but even before the COVID pandemic, there's been this change in how kids relate to one another, not communicating, not having a true social support system, but a virtual one, which doesn't have the same positive impact that one would get through face-to-face interactions or even interactions on the phone. So it was already sort of bubbling up before COVID happened. And then with COVID, of course, they're even more isolated because they're not in school. They weren't in school. Most kids weren't in school last year or only had a hybrid version. So, you know, we are social creatures. We depend on connectedness for our survival. That's the way our brains have been wired for really, you know, tens of thousands of years. So our brains were really seeking out those relationships that very quickly in our lifestyle have been depleted.
I know, I'm a hugger. You know, you can't hug on social media, really, right? You can just send the emoji. But yeah, I totally agree with that. You know, it is, you made a good point, Sherry, that, you know, there's good things about technology, right? The speed of it, the fact that we can reach out to others that are really far away from us and all of that. But yeah, we get this, it's almost like sanitized our, you know, true socialization that we used to have. Even with a phone call, when you weren't seeing the person, you could at least hear their voice and all of that. So yeah, I see that as a problem. And do you think that, before I get to you, Kaitlyn, do you think that the pandemic, because of the situation and the isolation and even more use of technology, because it was the only way in some circumstances when we closed down that we could even see our family members' faces, right? Do you think that post-pandemic, it's going to even cause more of this? Just reach out to people through technology, or do you think things will go back somewhat to what they were before?
I think it'll be sort of a combination. I think the technology and online learning, for example, is certainly here. Colleges have now geared up for that. There are many reasons why that's going to happen. Even before the pandemic, about 30% of college courses offered were online nationally. I think you're going to see just, more online education for high school students as well. It's a money saver. I mean, there's a financial incentive to having virtual learning.
Right.
So, I mean, I unfortunately, I think a large part of that is here to stay. But I also think one of the problems that kids face is that, we have changed their lives so dramatically through this pandemic. Aspects of growing up, which included important life events, were taken from them. They missed out on not only relationships, but normal life events in the course of adolescence that kids look forward to, such as
milestones,
milestones, getting their driver's license, going to their first dance, especially for athletes like Kaitlyn is an athlete. Athletes had that snatched away from them. Kaitlyn, you can talk about, an important piece, which is about expectations.
Yeah.
I mean, everything changed around us. I know for many kids who are my age, the sort of younger adolescents, feel like didn't have as many changes as the older ones did. But still, I think everyone is under the same boat where everything changed except for one thing, and that is the expectations of students in particular. So last year, teachers would expect same level of quality of work when our classes were moving online very frequently, or teachers wouldn't be able to come in, or in my case, I was taking classes 10 weeks at a time and then switching to a different class. So taking courses in a third of the amount of time that it normally takes to learn content. So yeah, I think it's really important to have a conversation, especially with your parents. Now is a great time to do it, as school is starting to gear up again, about their expectations and our own expectations of ourselves heading into the school year, and create that source of conversation and make it fluid. And I think it's really important to have those conversations frequently as well, because those are evolving conversations. But start those conversations now. Start them early with your kids if they're younger too. It'll set them up for success in the future for sure.
And so, Kaitlyn, I have two questions for you. One is it was part of the difficulty, the not knowing and the constant changing. You know how the rules have been constantly changing, and then a lot of districts throughout the country, oh, we're going to be hybrid. Oh, no, we're not. Oh, we're going to open now. Same with businesses, right? Oh, now we're not. That whole uncertainty too. Like if you just knew, okay, hybrid from this date to this date, then we're back in the classroom and that's it, you might have been able to compartmentalize it maybe a little bit more. I don't know. I want you to just speak to that for a moment.
No, yeah, exactly. And I think that falls under the same boat of expectations as well. I know for me personally, we were given rough dates or time periods in the school year where we'd be moving from, we called it quiet phase to emerging 1.0 to emerging 2.0 was just an example. But those dates were ever changing, and that's really frustrating, especially if you take 2 steps forward and then 5 steps back and so forth for over a year and a half now, honestly. And so it's really difficult, but I think that's a good segue into, I think a good way to cope is, now that we're more readily available to open up a little bit more, now that the brunt of the pandemic is over, is create an event or something to look forward to avoid that burnout. So we're spending so much time in front of the computer, especially on Zoom, and doing work in a confined space. So especially on weekends, for me, I find myself open with a lot of time, and I just think, okay, I have all day to do work. I can just procrastinate, and then I burn out if I try to do some work and take breaks too frequently. Having something to look forward to on those days, I think, avoids that burnout, because you have something to look forward to. You'll do some work and then go to hang out with your friends, or go outside, exercise, practice with your team, go to a club meeting, whatever it may be.
Yeah,
And then
I agree with that. That's a great idea, Kaitlyn. Let me ask you this real quickly though. What do you miss about in-person learning?
I'd say honestly, the connections that you make with your teachers, for me, especially as I'm applying for college, not having those face-to-face interactions has made having those teacher recommendations and requesting those teacher recommendations very, very difficult for kids that are my age. And so at my school, we pride ourselves on the small classes that we do have. And I'm very thankful that I do have that opportunity, but having that taken away was very, very difficult. And it's harder to learn that way too when you're not face to face, and teachers are also going through this for the first time as well. And so it's a lot of adjusting, and it wastes a lot of time as well. So it's frustrating for everyone.
Yeah. Education is so much about relationships. It's not as much about learning or transmitting information. It's about relationships. And I think the online learning and then the pandemic, and even for when you are in class, just wearing the mask, interferes with the relationship.
Yeah. And I mean, teachers in larger classrooms with say 28 to 30 students or whatever at the high school level, they have a new class come in at the beginning of the year. I mean, your face is covered. You're how do they know who's who? Yep. And you know, I think it's a good point, the relationships too, ladies. I mean, I have two early mentors. One was my creative writing college professor, and one was my AP English teacher actually in high school, whom I'm still totally in touch with. My English teacher is actually our section editor for poetry corner. So we've stayed in touch all these years. And I wonder, now that you've brought that up, will we have had the same kind of relationship if it was never an in-person relationship? Probably not.
Probably not. And this, just to circle back to what Kaitlyn said about making plans, you know, in a time of uncertainty, it's really important for kids to have a sense of perceived control. Even though they have very little control, they feel very powerless during this, even now, as we're trying to emerge from the pandemic with, you know, so much uncertainty about the Delta variant, or about whether or not, you know, when we're going to get the boosters, or how safe you really are, needing to show your vaccine passport. For them to have some kind of a sense of perceived control and some kind of a power source about what's going on in their lives is integral to their mental health.
Yeah, and it's almost like the parents really, well, we're going to get into the parents a little bit more, so I don't want to jump too much ahead, but you know, things are changing so quickly, and there's this sense that, you know, those who are giving us the instructions don't even really know what's going on. So you know, I think that that's contributing to a really big amount of stress for everybody, and then particularly teens, because their worlds have been turned upside down. I mean, their school day, right? That's where their peers are. That's where their activities are. That everything is surrounding your school day when you're a young person. So, you know what, Sherry, though, I'm wondering if, I know you've talked about the 4 tenets of burnout, and I find it fascinating. So I'm wondering if you can share with our audience what those 4 things are.
So, you know, these are, you know, 4 major pillars of burnout that have been studied for decades. A psychologist, Maslach, wrote about this in the early 80s. And the first thing we look at is emotional exhaustion. And this goes for teens as well as parents. You know, are you emotionally exhausted? Have you been stressed out? Have you been on edge? Have you had to have your internal alarm system going off constantly? That's you. There you go.
Yeah.
You know, it's emotional exhaustion. And you can just like sort of make a chart with these 4 pillars and figure out, well, which ones do I have? Depersonalization, which is what we certainly have seen during the pandemic. This, you know, you're not in those relationships. You don't have the same kind of connectedness that you did before. You're online, even just wearing the masks. You're not really feeling like you're an individual, but just, you know, another person under that mask. You don't have that relatedness. People are hostile oftentimes, or afraid of you, afraid of contracting something from you. When you think of just about how people look at each other.
Oh, I know, or walk around.
You know, if
they walk further away from you,
walk further away,
makes you feel like you're a walking, you know. germ
and
or
we-
something. I know.
Oh, and it just happened, the kids had palm tracers where they were tracked to see, if they were exposed to
Close
somebody who
contact.
had, was in contact with,
It's like a
maybe
Twilight
somebody.
Zone.
It is. So,
Yeah.
so
So surreal.
we have lived in this, like Kaitlyn said, a surreal environment of total depersonalization over the 18 months. And 40 years ago, this was predicted through research as being a serious component of burnout. So no wonder we feel that way. We have COVID burnout. The other thing that we feel, which is so true and sad for kids especially, is a diminished sense of accomplishment. A diminished sense of, personal gain, personal autonomy, feeling powerless. That's key to the burnout. And of course, because you can't do the things where you feel you can get accomplished in. You can't do your
We just
sports.
talked about milestones, right?
Right.
The award ceremonies, the championship meets for the
Graduation.
athletes, the graduations, all
Sure.
of that, right?
All of that. So, that's the third one. And then the fourth one is apathy. When you just, you basically give up, you're languishing, that's it. You've checked
You
out.
shut down, yeah.
Checked out. So those are, the four key tenets of burnout that you can examine. And this is actually a nice way to structure an authentic and non-threatening conversation with your teens.
Okay, yeah.
Where let's look at these four aspects of burnout and let's talk about how these are affecting your life. How are you experiencing, a diminished sense of achievement? Or how do you feel like you're just emotionally exhausted? When do you feel that way? What do those times have in common that you feel that way? Not only why I feel that way, but what is it about those situations, or what is it about this situation that's making you feel like you have less control, or that you feel like you haven't accomplished what you want? What's going on that's making you feel that way? What are some commonalities here? What can we do about it?
And so that brings back some of the control, right? When you can work it through and think
Yeah.
it through about what,
Yes.
and knowing your triggers, right?
Yes.
Can you move along to what parents can do to help teens with burnout then, Sherry? I think that's a perfect segue. What can we as parents do to help our young people? Not even just teens, our young people in their early 20s, that are maybe just getting out of college and starting in their careers. I mean,
Yes.
it's been tough for them, excuse me,
So-
for them as well, right?
Very tough. There's a recent study that was just published. Kaitlyn was reading it with me, came out last week in the Journal of American Medical Association. And it was a meta-analysis study of over 30 different research publications. 80,000 young people were screened and evaluated. 1 in 4 young people globally have depression. And anxiety. That's a lot. And clinically significant levels.
When was that done, Sherry?
It was just published last
thank
week.
goodness. I've been wondering when they were going to start to really dig into that piece.
So
of
there
this
have been
whole
a lot
thing,
of
right?
there have been a lot of studies. This one was just a meta-analysis where they took 29 studies to look at it. So 1 in 4 teens globally, and these are from different countries, experiencing clinically elevated depression symptoms, and 1 in 5 are experiencing clinically elevated symptoms of anxiety.
So that's the first thing a parent needs to know, that it's very likely their teen could fall into that group.
And then I want to just jump onto what Kaitlyn suggested earlier. I think it's really important to have an honest conversation about expectations, because then it's not threatening. It's not saying you need to do this or you need to feel this way, which is the wrong thing to do. It's talking about something objective. What are my expectations as a parent, and what are your expectations as a teen? I want to know what you expect. What do you expect from your college experience? What's a realistic expectation given the COVID parameters? What do I expect to achieve this year in school? What kind of life events do I expect to have? For young adults starting out, how much autonomy do I expect to have in this time of, serious problems getting a job, or the type of job you might want, because so many businesses
Right, because
are closed.
that's all up in the air, right? Some of them are not even back in the office yet. I can tell you my daughter's been working for a company and has never met most of her team in person because they're still working from home and she got hired from home. So that's another whole dynamic.
That's a whole other area. And really, I mean, besides the teenagers that I work with, my biggest population for clients are people in their 20s, because they have expectations that are not in line with the reality. Mm-hmm. And it's that balance. If you can envision like a seesaw, you look at what your expectations are and then how life behaved and how the reality is. Okay. And that difference, inside that difference, is actually where happiness lies. So if you're really out of balance, you're going to feel really unhappy because you had expectations based very much on an old reality.
Okay, that makes total sense. That makes, wow. And that's something you can expect. That makes total sense. And you can explain that to your teen or your
and have that authentic conversation with your young adult, and it's non-threatening. It's not about them. It's really about how to navigate a very difficult time.
Right. But you know, Kaitlyn, a lot of it, even with mom, and your mom, of course, can really, really help you out, right? But a lot of it has to do with what you can find from within too, right? To get through this. And I've heard that you've been very involved with wellness experts and in your school with helping others with this. So I'm hoping you can tell us just a little bit about that. And then maybe, I know you've talked about a few things earlier on in the conversation, but some strategies you've used to try to not experience this complete burnout.
Yeah, so my school actually just recently initiated this mental wellness council, and I'm a member of the inaugural class that started this program.
Excellent.
And it's a way to have, again, those conversations that my mom was talking about, but with kids that are your own age. And it's that falls into any group, but for me in particular, it's teenagers. But I think it's important to also have those fluid conversations with people who are going through things that are so similar to you, and to know that it's not only you, it's okay. Like my mom was saying, 1 in 4 teens are depressed and 1 in 5 youth have anxiety. To know that there are so many other people that are going through what you're going through in the same environment, in the same community, and they're feeling the same things in particular to where you're from or where you live or what school you go to, I think is really, really important, because they can understand you possibly better than your parents can, because they're not at school with you, obviously.
Right. True.
Yeah, so that's been really, really helpful. And we also have peer counseling groups as well that are run by students that do things really similar to us. But having that availability to have those open conversations with students anonymously, we don't write anything down. We just have fluid conversations whenever, wherever they want, in the confinements of our campus is, I think, really, really important. And what my mom was saying, we do activities, especially with our junior class last year. I mean, for me, juniors, it's a tough time in high school for sure. Absolutely. And so a lot of what we were trying to do is acknowledge that we know this is difficult. You know, there was a lot of focus on the graduating class in particular because of how much they'd missed during the school year, but knowing that we are paying attention to the junior class and the sophomore class and the freshman class, that we do care about you and we do care about your mental health, and we will get out of this, and that you're attending school at such a unique time, and that it's going to make everybody stronger in the end as well.
I think one of the things that, Kaitlyn and I've talked about is the importance of finding balance in your life. And, whether it's, you've talked about this, and I think schools can do a better job of that. Talking about finding the different aspects of your life that holistically make you emotionally healthy. You want to talk about, those exercise and
so I was talking about this a little bit earlier, but I think concretely writing down has helped me. Writing down those things you can look forward to in the day that are outside of the confinements.
Almost scheduling them, Kaitlyn, almost like
you
make sure you're going to do them, right? Because I'm one
Exactly.
of those that's like, oh, so I'm going to do Pilates today, or, I'm going to do my cardio workout, and then something happens with work and I get caught up, and then it's late, and then I'm hungry, then it's, how that whole thing
Yep.
happens to everybody,
Mhm.
right? I think it's a
Exactly.
great point, Kaitlyn, that you write it down and you actually know this is something I'm going to do. I'm going to stop everything and I'm going to do this for myself, right?
Yeah, and balance it as well. I mean, make realistic expectations as well. I mean, our workloads vary depending on how old you are and what job you partake in. So make that schedule realistic and something that you can hold yourself accountable to as well. And that's why I think it's really important too, now that things are starting to open up, or schedule things with friends. That could be exercising, going outside. I think that's the best thing to do, especially is spend time outside, away from inside of the house, exercising, moving. And so when you do schedule things with friends, that's sort of set, unless you move it 10 or 15 minutes back or whatnot. I think having something that's with somebody else that's structured is even better, because that holds you even more accountable to taking a break.
And they have sort of, at her school, Kaitlyn's involved with this organization called Heads Up, where, you want to talk about it? So you're spending time with friends, but you don't spend time with friends on your phone.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, no. And so
Because so many young people, they're walking with their phones, they're at a table to eat, and they're on their phones. They're always on their phones, right?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Put the phone away.
Yeah, that's what's special about our school too. I mean, we have sit down meals. So we sit with faculty members and students together.
That's fabulous.
We can't be on our phones at all during that time. And it's so nice. And COVID last year, unfortunately, took that away. And it was so hard to see the dining hall like that, just everybody on their phones, which is not normal at all for our community. So I think it's the responsibility of my class now, being seniors, to bring back those great traditions that make my school.
When you're
right,
at lunch,
and I don't want to blame the young people either on this. I mean, we know that a lot of adults are doing the same thing, right? So I don't want to just put that on you guys.
So we do, Kaitlyn and I are big fans of Kripalu, which is up in your neck, not too far from you, in the Berkshires and Lennox. And, we have, learned so much from our classes at Kripalu, and we actually follow a program from the Whole Being Institute called Spire, which is just a good way of checking in to see how you're doing emotionally. And Spire stands for the following: spiritual. So how's your spirit? Are you making meaning in your life, finding purpose? Like Kaitlyn was saying, that these are unique times. And just checking in, what are you doing to find purpose? How are you assigning meaning and purpose to what you're going through? Are you doing something for others? Then there's the P, which stands for being physical. It's like taking care of your physical body, and that's, exercise. And then there's the I, the intellectual stimulation, intellectual growth. And then the R, relationships. Are you fostering relationships? What are your relationships like? Are you spending time with people, not just texting them, really having conversations? And then the E is about emotional growth and emotional resiliency. And what are you doing in your life to promote coping and resiliency? Because if you have all of these elements in your life, you're going to feel more in balance. So it's a way that we work together. If Kaitlyn's not feeling right, if I'm not feeling right, it's a structure within which we can say, hey, something's not in balance here. Let's look at what's missing this week. So you should have Spire in your life every week.
Okay. Now, I would like for the two of you to just take a minute to tell our audience a little bit more about PositiviTeens and what you do there.
Yeah, no, you can start.
Well, we started PositiviTeens about 3.5 years ago, right after the Parkland shooting. We used to live in Parkland, and Kaitlyn was in school that day in the next town over, and my husband, her dad, is a trauma surgeon. He was working a mile away from the school that day. And so Kaitlyn had friends in class that day, and she unfortunately saw live feeds of the shooting, of the violence.
That can't be shown on national television. I mean, these images.
Yeah. That's a visual you can't sort of let go of, right?
So we, we're really fortunate in that we were already discussing important issues about mental wellness in teens long before COVID. So we have done webinars together during the course of COVID, including one with her Heads Up group at school. And then another one of the ones we did recently is China. You can talk about that. Kaitlyn co-presented with me and two artists to over 1,000 students in China.
Oh, see, that's the beauty of the technology, right?
Exactly. No, there
That's
are
great.
benefits, and that's one of them. I mean, these students you're talking to are students who are coming over to the United States or looking to come over to the United States to study abroad, and they brought me on to talk about the student experience in the United States, especially how it's evolved during COVID and what's changed and what it's going to look like in the future. And so bringing in the idea that there needs to be mental wellness and balance within your day when you are here studying, I think was really, really great, just because they got to hear something like that before they even got over here, which is, 10 steps ahead of most students my age. So I was really happy I could join them on that call.
Oh, good.
But it was also gratifying to know, and we're going to be doing one in the Middle East in February. It's interesting to know that there's commonality amongst teenagers around the world. Yeah. So many of the stressors that, our teens here in the USA are experiencing are also those that teens all over the world are experiencing right now, in terms of feeling disconnected, lost, having their goals diminished, feeling powerless or hopeless. So I think one of the key messages is that you're not alone, that everyone's experiencing something right now.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And so I'm going to unfortunately have to wrap this up. I'm thinking I need to have the two of you back on again because there's so many subjects we can tackle with this, right? I'm going to, at the end, for listeners who want to contact you, we'll have the URL for PositiviTeens so that they can contact you about workshops and information there. Does that sound good?
That's great. Just go to PositiviTeens.com.
Yes.
Or give us a call at 954-866-7500. And we have offices in Connecticut and Florida, but we do our webinars all over the world.
Oh, that's fabulous. So I'm hoping that people will contact you. This is really important. And I love what you guys are doing. And I want to thank you again for being on with me today.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I'll close as I always do by wishing all of our readers and our listeners good health, happiness, and continued inspiration. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.